Hey, good morning, everybody, or maybe not so much morning, depending where you're joining from around the world. As I was getting ready for today, I was remembering a time a couple of weeks ago where I signed on to a workshop with a brand new client, and I got an error message, said something about this meeting has been canceled, and I freaked out. And I was like, what am I going to do? And everything's going to be awful. And it was really amazing to me how much my brain just wouldn't think. Do you know what I'm talking about when you get yourself into a weird situation and emotions get raised or stress goes all the way up and your amazing brain that usually serves you pretty well all of a sudden doesn't serve you so much anymore? It stops working. Today, we are going to delve into the science behind how that actually happens, why it's a very human thing, and what you can do about it. Today are the skills that lead to wisdom. And so welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is David Lieberman. I am one of the founders of Gravity Learning. Gravity Learning is a research-based professional skills organization. And so what that means is that we like to delve into science and jury journal articles. We're not so big on business trends and TED Talks, although those are fun. And then we like to turn that into okay, so what can you do with that in a practical way that is useful moving forward? This workshop series, once a month, we do a on the house workshop. So you can come experience what Gravity Learning is like. And I want to point out that today's workshop is a workshop. It's not a webinar or a seminar. The idea is when we learn, we talk, we think about our life, we apply things for real. And so that's what we'll be doing today. One of the big things with workshops is seeing the people around you. So let me give you a second or so to get your camera rolling, let people see you. I feel like Miss Nancy. I see Adriana. I see Lena. I see Amanda. Right. Uh, are y'all ready to fully participate today and get something out of it, and maybe have that chance of growth? It's some beautiful stuff that we're getting into. When we learn, the learning, of course, works better if we apply it to something in real life. So tell you what, grab something to write with. Y'all have a pen or your writing implement of choice. Yeah. And let's do this. Let's make it real. We're going to start here. Jot down a couple of words about a real situation where your emotions led you to do something you weren't proud of. Maybe led you to not do something. You know what I mean? Sometimes emotions hold us back instead. You can choose something at work or at home. Let's choose something that you're okay talking about, right? Because we'll be working with other people and having conversations about that. It doesn't need to be a big thing. Sometimes I roll my eyes or make a face, and later I'm certainly not that proud of it. You know what I mean? Okay, so there we go. Evolutionary psychologists are big into the idea that almost all of our automatic behaviors, things that we do without thinking, come because in some way it's an evolutionary advantage. Yeah? How many of you get hangry? I know I do. Right? It took me till I was like my mid-20s to figure out that I was mad, not because somebody was doing something, but just because I was hungry. Well, when you get hungry and then you get angry, evolutionarily, you go out and get something to eat. You go do something, right? If you get lonely, then you move yourself around other people, and human beings survive better around other people. So these emotionally driven behaviors are certainly advantageous to us on an evolutionary scale. They're not that advantageous to us on a relationship scale or at work or, that kind of business, right? And so we've all learned as we grow and suffer how to work with our own emotions, yeah? And so I'm going to pop you all into discussion groups. Here's the discussion. You might consider writing it down. The very first thing that happens every single time we get into discussion groups is people go, what are we talking about again? Every time. Right. So here's the topic. How do you personally control your emotions? What do you do? What techniques have you developed? Hold on 1 second. Let me create these here rooms. The rooms will have 4-ish people in there. You're going to have 5 minutes with a 1 minute countdown, right? Up at the top, oh, a 30-second countdown. We're on a time limit today, folks. And so the idea is up at the top, it'll say 30 seconds and you finish up. If you can't resist the leave the room button, then you'll get to hang out with me, which will, of course, be pretty amazing for you. And otherwise, the main idea here is everybody gets a chance to talk. Yeah. So if you look around and you say, what about you, Lisa? Then you can be the bringer of inclusivity today. Good. All right. So here we go. How do you control your emotions? Like, how do you really do it? Not how do you think you're supposed to do it? That kind of thing. See you soon. Those breakout rooms are kind of fun, aren't they? Maybe it's the best part of this type of remote communication. And I mean, I still enjoy pushing buttons in elevators. So I'm not surprised I'm getting a kick out of those. Let's reach out to a couple of folks. Why don't we go to let's go to Barney and then maybe Lena and how about Robert Hernandez? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about trends you were noticing in the discussion or things that stood out for you, or really whatever's on your brain. It doesn't need to be a big long discussion. 20 seconds is fine. Barney, can you lead us off? Can you unmute? And...
Sure. In our group, people shared that depersonalizing is a way that to try and take the emotion out of it, to realize it's not always about us, that we're the target of it. So I think that rang true for me as a good strategy to try and think that it's not necessarily about me, that we can try and it's easier to do at a work situation than it is at home sometimes, but that's a way to go.
Yeah.
And that I think all of us mentioned that we try and take a step back in one way or another, either physically or sometimes just emotionally from the situation, and try and give ourselves some space and to try and distance ourselves from some of the conflict, maybe, or the emotion of a situation sometimes when we're not really wanting to engage with it. So those were a couple of things that stood out in our group.
Interesting. That idea about like taking steps to depersonalize, and part of that is creating space. I like that you said both emotional space and physical space. It makes a difference sometimes, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Lena, how about you? What were you noticing in your group?
Pretty similar to Barney. And so we, it was count to 10, so that's something we learned as children, many of us, which I thought was pretty powerful, can go a long way. And then also maybe sleep overnight, kind of think about it. So kind of the trend of pausing. So I shared slow and low. And so really kind of de-escalating or self-regulating yourself as well. So yeah.
So it's that idea of time, really, whether it's 10 or overnight, or I mean, sometimes it's years for me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Robert, what might you add?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Hey, David, good to see you again. Just our consensus was very similar to what Barney and Lena came up with in regards to just sort of moving away from the situation, whether it's physically or emotionally. And I shared that, me personally, taking at least a full day to make those important decisions when emotions involved, rather than doing that knee-jerk, right, type thing. So yeah, it's just sort of distancing ourselves from that situation.
Yeah. Creating that distance, right? Especially when we have the luxury of doing that. If our leader does something that triggers us, it's a little hard to be like, I'll see you later. Right? What's interesting is that there is an actual answer to this about how do you control your emotions. So if you're ready for the answer, here it comes. Answers are always nice to see on slides. So happy birthday. Ready? Here's how you control your emotions. Ready? You don't. Human beings don't control emotions. We have emotions. We don't control them. Right? They're automatic. Now, of course, we can control our response to the emotions. And you're like, David, come on. Like, what do you talk about? Like, you can't control your emotions. Well, here, check it out. Here's how it works. This is your brain. You can tell because of the sign that says that it's you. Yeah. Right over nya. This is where most of experience happens. When you're like walking down the street, you experience just normal experience sort of in the back of your head. Some people say they can feel where they're experiencing experience, right? Of course, you've got your brainstem here where all of the automatic controls happen, including like duck, right? So it might make sense that when we're experiencing things, that those experiences don't happen all over our brain all at one time. That's not reality. They happen in this sort of area. Yeah. Now, right up above that, here is a grouping of a number of different brain systems, 6 to 8, depending who you're arguing with, that they call the limbic system. The limbic system has pieces or parts in it that mostly control our emotions. For example, the thalamus is where most emotions generate from. Things like happiness and sadness and disgust. That's a good emotion, isn't it? All kind of starts from sort of back here. We also get the amygdala in there, which is sort of the alarm bell of your brain. You know, when you go, you have those little moments of like, those come out of that area of your brain. They're all generated there. By the way, there's some really interesting research that shows that our eyes go towards the direction of our brain that we're looking in. When you're sad or happy or most emotions, your eyes kind of drop a little bit, don't they? Right to the bottom part of your brain. Now here, check this out. This is where it starts getting important. If most experiences here, your brain doesn't just light up. That energy, those messages move throughout your brain. They go out here like this, yes? They generate or flow. And look what they hit first. They hit the limbic system first. Yeah. Your thinky brain is around the outside here, is the cortex, and then the cerebral cortex, where most of the really like conscious thinking happens. It's physical. We physically have emotions before we ever think. If you've ever said to yourself, like, David, or whoever you are, why don't you think first? Why don't you think first? The answer is because you are a human being. Human beings do not think first. We emote first. You can't make yourself do it. And I bet you've suffered just like I've suffered. Yeah. That's a pretty interesting sort of thought there. Why don't we reach out and get some responses? Why don't we go to let's go to Corrine, and then maybe Brian with a Y, and then Samantha. And maybe you can say a little bit about your thoughts. Like, what are you noticing? What's coming up for you? It doesn't have to be a big thing. Corrine?
Yeah, so I agree with you, and only because over the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of work on myself and coaching, meditation, and that's when I learned. I actually thought before you can control your emotion, but I actually learned that you cannot control your emotion. You can only control how you're going to react to this emotion. And it's interesting with the emotion to have the body feeling, you know, the sensation, the burning, the heat or the cold or the sweating hand, and so on and so forth. So those are, for me, they are a sign of that something is going on straight away. And then it's my reaction, and I learn, and I actually keep on learning how to act from, you know, certain kind of trigger.
Yeah, right. And so many of us have that, like, oh wow, it's different than I've been trying my whole life. That's fantastic. Brian, what are your thoughts here about like the way that it's mechanical in our brains, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we've been taught for our lives that emotions aren't necessarily positive. And I think leaning into your emotions and embracing that you are emotional because you care or you're passionate about something really can reframe the problem as something positive, and something that if you can not necessarily control, but harness, I think that's when our most powerful outputs are achieved.
That's some wisdom you've just dropped there. Cool, Brian. How about you, Samantha?
Well, I find that interesting that the physical reaction comes before thought, and I've done some training in equine facilitated learning and psychotherapy. So I find that the counselors that I work with, because I work with horses, and they bring up lots of issues for people. So the counselors will often say, where do you feel that in your body? And they'll get the client to talk about their physical responses so that they can learn, oh, when I get scared, I feel it in my gut, or I feel it in wherever, body parts, so that they're more aware of their physical reactions to cue them for later how to cope with it.
Yeah. And the idea that it's different for different people, and that that physical is a real thing that follows emotions, isn't it?
Mhm.
Interesting. Interesting. Any questions coming up? We'll have time for questions today. Tom Vorvis is manning the chat as well. Anything coming up for anybody? All right, fantastic. Well, it gets a little bit deeper. Because y'all have heard that whole thing about like we don't use our whole brain, like we only use this small percentage of our brain and blah blah blah. Like turns out that's not true at all. We use almost all of our brain. We just don't use it all at the same time. If your whole brain lights up, you have a seizure and you fall down. So what ends up happening, interestingly enough, is the parts of your brain that are working tend to use up the energy and the oxygen and whatnot. So here, check this out. Same old good slide, yeah? When your limbic area is heavily activated, they call it arousal, limbic arousal. Most of the blood with oxygen goes there, and that's where all the electrical conductivity starts happening as well. You know, when you're feeling like pretty emotional and the rest of your brain doesn't work, you know what I mean? You can't think. That's because that's how it is. When one part of your brain is working hard, the other parts of your brain don't work. When you're feeling emotional, you literally can't think. I mean, it's literal. Have you experienced that? It's pretty neat, right? So you're like, David, why can't I think? It's because it's the physicality of it all. Here are the big things. The thalamus and the amygdala, that's where most of the emotions come from. When you have experience, it happens down in the base of your brain and radiates outward. You can't change it. That we experience emotion consciously, like before we ever think. I mean, there's no way to change that. And then the other idea is that when our limbic system is busy going, good luck making an intelligent decision. I mean, good luck. Sometimes you'll make decisions, but they're automated decisions, yeah? All right, questions about the neuropsych of it, or objections, or?
David, it's Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
My question is, hi, it's good to see you again. How are they figuring this out? Are they mapping electricity, watching electrons fly? I mean, how is it that they know all of this is true?
Yeah, what a beautiful question, right? And you kind of spark like a bit, I see a bit of myself there. I'm like, wait a minute, how? Like, where's this come from? The oxygen comes from MRI studies, right? MRI can tell like very conclusively if there's a large collection of blood in one particular part of your brain. By the way, MRIs aren't that great at like little pieces, but when there's a big one, it can tell pretty well. With the electrical connectivity, it's electrical leads that they put on your head. You've seen those studies where they have like the leads that lead there, right? And then they have people experience emotion by getting them into a particular state and seeing what happens. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Right. So here's other questions is what I meant to say. Anything I can say more about or clarify? Okay, well then here we go. This is the secret. This is the secret to how you calm down. The secret to emotional de-escalation, right? When you decide, hey, I better de-escalate a little bit here, is getting other parts of your brain working. That's it, right? Because it works the other way too. When your limbic system is stealing all of the energy and blood, if you get a different part of your brain working, then it literally takes energy and oxygen from the limbic system, and your emotions chill out a little bit. A couple of you said, when I want to control my emotions, I go for a walk. Yes. What happens is the motor cortex lights up, which is kind of up here, because if it doesn't, then you fall down while you're walking, and it literally takes energy from the limbic system, and you chill out a little bit. All right. Some of you said you talk. It's the same thing. Some of you do exercise. It's the same exact thing. When you're waiting, what you're really doing is just waiting for that to sort of ease up a little bit. Neat, yeah? So if you want the secret, here's the secret. By the way, we'll send out the slide deck and a little cheat sheet and all that stuff later. So if you're furiously thinking, how will I remember all of this? You don't need to. So what we're talking about today is making intelligent decisions while we're having emotions so that we can be proud of ourselves later, basically, right? When we talk about emotional intelligence, that's what we're talking about. It's about using your intelligence while you're emotional or while emotions are high, yeah? And once you kind of start getting a handle on that, or at least making a dent, I mean, that's the way your brain works. Maybe you'll make a dent on it. Then we can start looking at what's going on around us and starting to make intelligent decisions about other people's emotional states, right? So here's the thing. If we're trying to get another piece of our brain working, and that's how we will de-escalate our emotions and at the same time make intelligent decisions, which part of your brain do you think we're trying to get working? It's the thinking part, right? The prefrontal cortex. You know, what's interesting is the prefrontal cortex is the most energy hungry part of your brain. While you're thinking, it lights up more electricity wise and pulls more blood with MRIs and with the EEG's leads, right, than any other part of your brain. You've seen it when you go out and do something and you're like, I don't know why I'm so tired. It's because you thought more that day. Yeah. Right. So here we go. Conscious thought comes from the prefrontal cortex. That's this part that our designers love to label. Yeah. And so if you're trying to activate intelligence while emotions are high, what you're really doing is trying to activate that prefrontal cortex. It would be pretty awesome if you could be like, well, activate. And it doesn't quite work like that. So here's what we're going to look at. At Gravity, whenever we can, we try to find studies that study people who are already good at this stuff and then break down what they did. You know, old school things around here's how to act or assertiveness, that kind of stuff. It's just some psychologist made that stuff up and said, that sounds good. And they did it. Like, David, when you do this, I feel like that. You know what I mean? Somebody just made that stuff up. And so this comes from a study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology, where they're trying to figure out, like, how do we actually do that stuff? The application of psychology, where what they did was they studied 793 different people and found the ones who were the best at managing their emotions. And it turns out that all of those people had, this is how I do it. Like, they weren't just good at it, they learned how to do it. And so what we'll look at now are the steps that were most highly correlated with how these people did that, and then we'll break those down. It's nice to have steps to do things, isn't it? All right, here we go. So these are the basic steps of those. If you want to write them down, then please feel free. Look, your limbic brain is going. And if you want to think that it's trying to do a thing, what it's trying to do is drive some sort of action, isn't it? If that limbic brain is rolling and rolling and rolling, good luck. Good luck. Like, you're like, well, just stop and think about this. And you're like, I will do that next time. And then it's so hard to do because your limbic brain doesn't want to let go, right? We will delve into the most successful methodology to get your limbic brain to let go. After you've de-energized your limbic brain a bit, the next step is to get your thinky brain working. Right, so notice we didn't say, go ahead and make your decision. You want to get that thinking brain working first so that when you try to make your decisions or choices, you're already up there in that part of your brain, yeah? And then the third step, which is the easiest one, decide what you're going to do. And these are the three through it. Any questions or thoughts or any whatnot so far? Tom, anything popping up in the chat?
Couple of comments here and there, some observations, but no questions that need to be answered. Thank you, David.
You're very welcome. Nice to hear from you, Tom. Your voice is always nice. So, hey, check it out. You know, it's interesting that when we said, hey, how do you control your emotions? Nobody said, well, I clamp down on them, I suppress them, right? And the reason that that's interesting is because that's the natural human reaction. We have all seen as we grew up as children that just letting our emotions out was not really such a great idea, right? So to control our behaviors, what we tend to do is sort of clamp down on that emotion, right? Suppress that emotion. Do you kind of agree? You sort of like, I'm getting frustrated. I'm going to hold that down a little bit so that in this meeting, I don't make a face or, something like that, right? How's suppressing your emotion work for you? Does it work good? Okay. Well, I mean, it keeps you from doing the stuff that later you're very ashamed of. But what's also interesting is that it's certainly not giving your limbic system what it wants. And when you suppress that emotion, limbic arousal actually goes up. Like the electricity goes more. You feel it too, don't you? Pushing and pushing and pushing on you. This is a really interesting point here, I think. Why don't we reach out for some thoughts? Why don't we go to let's go to Adriana and then maybe to Rob. Like, what are your thoughts or what are you noticing here about that idea about our natural reaction is to sort of hold it down. And when we do, it kind of makes it worse. Is that true? What do you think, Adriana?
Yes, I absolutely agree. There are definitely like people that I've encountered or, people that I know who do this as a way of life. And it doesn't seem healthy because you never truly know what they're thinking. And so then you can't perhaps help them through it if they want help. So yeah, I don't like the clamp down technique personally. I don't use it.
Oh, well, good for you. Normally that's the most common. We use it all day, every day. Rob,
Well,
how about you?
depends on the situation. Like at work, I'm not just going to laugh, but yeah.
Rob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if what I'm doing is part of clamping down or not. Sometimes it's just taking deep breaths, and then sometimes I'll tell my group I have like a little sponge ball, a physical thing that I kind of squeeze to kind of get it away from my mind to something physical. I don't know if that's considered clamping or not, or if that's releasing the clamp, but those are kind of what I do. But I'm sure there's some clamping going on sometime, somewhere, subconsciously,
What the studies show, and this the one anyway that was published in the Journal of Psychophysiology, which is the one that we're referencing here, is that usually that like squeezing the ball or going for a walk is a learned reaction to like, man, I'm really clamping down on this and it's getting worse. So why don't I do something like this? It's interesting, isn't it? All right. So here's the thing. When we're feeling an emotion, we're like, and you sort of push it down and then it gets worse. You've all been there. People who that's their normal way, right? Especially those of us who are giving or don't want to cause trouble, that kind of stuff. Good luck making an intelligent decision while you're doing that. The difference between suppressing an emotion and managing an emotion is just acknowledging that emotion exists. They don't know why it works. They think it's because you're taking some sort of action, which is evolutionarily what emotions are driving you to do, to take an action, yeah? And maybe you're giving that part of the brain what it wants. I mean, brains don't really want things, but you get the idea, yeah? That it wants you to be like, hey, I realize that and I'm doing something about it, right? So if what we're trying to do here is get your limbic brain to let go, that's the step that we're on right now, yeah? Really what that just means is labeling that emotion. Now, what's interesting here, this is step one. You're like, I'm getting a little like the red flags are going off, yeah? You might consider literally labeling the feeling that you're feeling. This wheel that you're looking at here was developed by a psychologist named Plutchik. And aside from like having a really sexy name, he decided that he was going to map out the way emotions work. Now, what he was really trying to do here was say, happy is the opposite of angry, and sad is the opposite of fearful, yeah? And instead, what happened is people went, yeah, nice wheel, though. I know someone who was in a workshop here, and she said, well, we have 3 daughters. And we have a bunch of emotions that are running around teenage daughters, 3 teenage daughters. We have a bunch of emotions that are running around our house all the time, and they're not always really well defined. And so we have something like this up on our fridge. And when we're like, I'm freaking out, we go up to the fridge and start like, what am I actually feeling here? Right. And I asked her, does it make it better? And she says, it really works. What we're not trying to say is, hey, go hang up the wheel of emotions on your fridge. Although if you want to, you'll have this slide deck and you can print it and cut it out and put it on your fridge. What we are saying is, good luck intelligently working with emotions if we're kind of clamping down on those emotions. And statistically, the best way to reduce limbic arousal, statistically, is by acknowledging the emotion exists. Hey, real quick, remember in the beginning of the workshop when we said, like, what's a decision or something that you did that you weren't proud of because of your emotions? Do you still have that written down? Can you see the wheel? If you lean in, what were you feeling? If you had to label it. It's interesting, isn't it? You know, I told you that story about where I logged into a workshop, or if you were here in the very beginning, I logged onto a workshop and it said like meeting canceled and I freaked out. What I actually did is said, hold on, David, hold on, you are panicking. And as soon as I said that, it chilled it out a little bit. It was really interesting. All right. Thoughts or why don't we reach out to feedback? Like, I feel like there's a lot here, isn't it? Why don't we go to let's go to Amy Yeager, and then maybe is it Mitzig? Am I pronouncing it correctly? And then let's go to Stephanie, and maybe you can say a little bit about your thoughts about this whole labeling the emotion thing, or how acknowledging that an emotion exists helped to de-escalate it, or really whatever's going on up there is fine. Amy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really like this wheel. I mean, I was kind of thinking back to the situation that I wrote down at the beginning, and then was looking at this wheel and thinking I thought I knew what the emotions were. And then in looking at this, I'm like, oh my gosh, there was really so much more to it. And so it's just interesting to kind of, it's almost, I don't know, in a way it like validates like, okay, yeah, I had so much going on and so many more emotions maybe involved at play than I even realized. No wonder, the situation, kind of occurred like it did. So this just seems really powerful to me to be able to kind of really identify what all those emotions are. And I think it's, probably often so much more than we initially think.
It's interesting to say it's powerful. Mm-hmm. And man, if you can like decrease limbic arousal and make your emotions chill out a little bit so you can make smart decisions, that's pretty powerful. Mm-hmm. How about you, Mitzik? It's yeah, there we go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, when you're talking of the wheel, the first thing that comes to mind is the template that you're creating is great. It's useful because you're able to get your limbic brain, label your emotions. But what I'm thinking right now is, now how do I get that template to kick in before I make a reaction because of the emotions that I'm feeling right now? Because at the heat of the moment, I know David said this. I need to label it first. But before I could even do that, I'm already reacting. And if I freeze at that moment, somehow, I might not be able to suppress my emotion. I might be able to control my words, but it would physically manifest somewhere else. My eyes would roll. I would lip something without wording anything. My fist would close or whatnot.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying, hey, this is great and everything right now. And how am I able to do this when emotions are rolling?
That's correct.
Because you're right, it's not easy. You will almost certainly feel resistance to it. Your brain will be like, I do not want to label that emotion, get off my whatever. What the research shows anyway is that it's practice is the answer. I'm really happy you brought it up. Normally this workshop is 2 hours long, and so we have more time for more information coming here. Here's a really interesting statistic. This is how many times it takes trying this before it becomes easier. And it's 8 to 12 times. If 8 to 12 times, you're like, hold on a minute, what's this? Forget that. Around the 8th time, it starts to become like, okay. I tell you, for me, I bet you it was more than 8.
So where you say it becomes a muscle memory on the 8th.
Yeah, it's literally practice. And there's some really interesting things that happen neurologically with your dendrites. Your neurons actually grow more little spines on the end of it to accept the electrical flow. And the more you try, the more little spines grow. And so it literally becomes easier for your brain to do something that's hard. But it takes like 8 to 12 tries. It's like lifting weights, I guess. Nice question. How about you, Stephanie? What's your response here?
Oh, my response is I love the wheel. I was thinking of a recent experience, and I find it like it's validating. Look, I did have that overwhelmed, and look, it's in the stress category. Look, that's the bad category. It's a real thing. So no, I think this is great. I'm going to be one of those people who cuts out the wheel. But it's interesting that you picked on me right now, because the event that I wrote down at the beginning, now I kind of know what I was doing. At the time, I didn't know what I was doing, but it happened this past summer, and I was after 3 years, I was going on vacation to Greece, and it was in June, and everybody was flying, every seat was full, and I'm driving to the airport and find out that my flight's been delayed such that I would never make my connection and never get to my end destination. And I was driving, and I had people in the car, and there was a lot riding on me, and my brain first went to that gut, that very visceral, like, I'm going to miss the trip. We're never going to get there. Like, if we I had already played out every what if awful scenario. And then I said, I have to think. And I said, quiet in the car. I have to think. I actually pulled the car off to the side of the road. And then that sort of like engineer brain kicked in, and I started problem solving. But that just what you're saying now I'm like, oh, that's what I was doing. I had no idea. So now I know.
It's cool, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I saw that Stephanie asked in the chat, like, is it possible to calm the limbic brain by channeling or taking on a new thought like gratitude? And absolutely. Like what the research says is anything you consciously try to do de-energizes the limbic brain a little bit because you're consciously trying, right? What we're talking about here is what's been shown to be statistically most successful for the largest number of people in the study, right? So if you've got a way that works better for you, gravity, we're not here to tell you any shoulds. It's just, this is what the science says works the best. Cool, isn't it? All right.
David, one thing, like I always think, like, whenever something not present comes up, just meditate. It's like I usually say Om or something that sound like internally, and try to calm down myself and then react. Yeah. This is the critical part of it. But sometimes it so happens, even though the template is there, it doesn't kick in.
Yeah.
I emote.
Well, I mean, the thing is your brain physiology is your brain physiology. And these reactions are going to happen to you for the rest of your life. That's the way it is, right? And if we design some sort of habit to put into place where we notice, we're like, wait a minute, hold on a minute, what was that thing? And then we practice that thing. After a while, it starts to become easier. Well, this technique is useful because you can use it in the moment. If your boss says something that offends you in a meeting, it's hard to say, hold on a minute and meditate, right? You can go, oh man, I'm feeling offended, right? And that literally de-energizes that part of your brain.
Yeah.
All right. Because of time, we'll move on. This is the most statistically effective step 1. Is to name the emotion you're feeling so that your limbic brain will let it go, right? Here comes step 2. Remember, step 2 is trying to turn on your thinking brain, your prefrontal cortex, right? So that you can use it to make a good decision in a minute. There are a group of therapists that subscribe to the idea that critical thinking is the way through most therapy situations, right? They belong to the foundation for critical thinking. Those are probably big party guys. If you meet them at a party, they're probably amazing. They're not all the way off base though, because critical thinking is really about thinking about your thinking, which is where cognitive behavioral therapy comes from. Let's examine our thoughts and figure out where we're wrong. They say that the most important thing to do is to activate your thinking brain before you start trying to figure something out. And the way we start thinking about something is by asking questions, don't we? Questions generate thoughts. These questions that we're about to bring up now are the 4 most statistically successful questions at turning on your brain. Now, I want to point out that you're not trying to argue with yourself right now. You're literally asking a question so that you can turn on your brain. I'm going to invite you to pick one to memorize, right? Because in 2 days, when you're like, what is that question again? That's not going to work. If you don't have it in your pocket, good luck. These are the big ones. Ready? Hey, is this the only feeling I could be feeling right now? Your brain will probably go, oh, no, probably not. And it'll start thinking, yeah? I like this one. What information is left out? Interestingly enough, this one is kind of a variant of the same question, isn't it? What don't I know about this situation? For me, this last one comes in really handy when what's triggering me is a person, not a situation. So what reasonable explanation could exist for this person to be acting like that? Now, again, you're not trying to argue with yourself. They might just be being a, words I'm not supposed to say during workshops, right? It's the idea that you're turning on your brain and getting thinking going. Neat, yeah? So if you think, oh, hold on, what am I feeling right now? Man, I'm getting really impatient. Like, is this the only way I could be feeling? Probably not. Now your brain is working, isn't it? For you, hey, in the chat real quick. If you were going to memorize one of these, which one do you pick? 1, 2, 3, what do you pick? You don't have to write out the whole thing. That would be painful. 1, 2. Oh, there's a pretty wide spread. My go-to is 1. I don't know why I like that one. I'm like, what else could I be feeling right now? Well, instead of panicking, I could be just thinking about it makes it work. Yeah. All right, hold on a second. We're talking about memorizing this, yeah? How long do you think it takes to memorize one question? Here's the answer, 20 seconds. It takes 20 seconds, right? So y'all have picked yours to memorize, yes? I'm gonna set 20 seconds on the clock, and then I'll check in with you in 5 minutes and see if it's still up in your head. Ready? Memorize just one. Go. And 20. Do y'all have it? Is it up there? Hold on one second. Set alarm for 5 minutes. We so live in the future. Isn't that awesome? All right, here we go. So the whole deal today is emotions happen. You can't control them, they happen. What you can do is control your response to it. And statistically, the most effective response is to de-energize your limbic brain a little bit, let things go. Be like, I hear you, limbic brain. I'm feeling panicky or mad or whatever. Then we can start our intelligent brain working by asking it a question. Now you're thinking. Here comes the last step. Ready? Last step is the easiest step. Your brain is already working. You decide what you want to do. Now, if you say, what am I going to do? It's such a wide question. Decision-making experts say that the best way to make decisions is to aim a decision in a particular direction. So the one that we like is gravity, is what decision can I make that I'll be proud of later? Proud of later. right? I've made decisions in the moment that I was real proud of and not so proud later. If you're thinking, well, my pride plugs into me winning at all costs, then pick a different aim here. That's the third step. It's easy. Your brain's already working. Yeah. All right. Questions. Tom, has anything come up in the chat question wise or anything burning for y'all?
We had a couple of really good questions.
We have time for one.
Real quickly, let's go with one. And it was our responses, happy or sad, opposites. Aren't they the result of how we switch on at the moment or situation without thought? Then with thought, we can make a choice in how to feel or express it. So the question is, aren't these responses, happy, sad, the result of the moment or the situation? And then when we think about it, with thought, we can make a choice in how we express or feel.
Well, so our emotional response is an automatic thing that your brain does in response to the situation. Now, we can also have automatic thoughts based on emotions, right? You're thinking, I should totally do this and run off and do it. And then you're not happy about that later. You guys have all got that, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So the idea here is instead of that automated thinking, we're trying to get in the way of that so that we make intellectual based decisions instead when we're feeling emotional.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's helpful there.
Yeah.
You know, in gravity learning workshops, we're not just about some idea and here's a tool. I mean, let's label the emotion and then ask yourself that thinky question. If you don't rehearse something right away, you're never going to use it again. You know what I mean? So how do you rehearse emotional management? Well, here's how. Ready? Y'all might write this down. We're going to pop you into a room with a partner. You will find out about your partner's situation, and then you will be their emotional management guidance today. You're going to play their brain so they don't have to. You'll say, well, that's interesting. What feeling were you feeling? You know, ask them to label the feeling. Then you'll say, hey, what was your memorized question? And you ask them that question. They'll say, oh, yeah, maybe it wasn't the only feeling I could have been feeling. I might have been feeling, I don't know. And then you hit them with, well, what could you have done that you'll be proud of later? Y'all might take a screenshot or write down what you're going to be doing because the slides don't go with you into the breakouts, yeah? Now, normally the way we do these is one person does it and then we switch up and somebody else does it. And because of the limited time today, it's not going to work out like that. What you'll do is one person will play the brain and one person will play the answering questions. You'll interview your partner. You guys can figure it out. You're all grown-ups, yeah? Any questions about what we're doing? You're going to approach the real situation that they wrote down earlier and ask them the 3 questions of emotional intelligence. Kind of cool, yeah? All right, I'm gonna put you all into groups of 3. We want to make sure somebody's not off checking their email or something like that. Hold on a second. You can decide who will be the interviewer and who will answer questions. Hey, by the way, it's 5 minutes. Do you still have your question in your head? What was that question you memorized? All right, here we go. I will see you all. We're going to do a quick style one. So it's going to be 3 minutes and then 30 seconds on the end. Decide who's going to interview and just jump right in. See y'all soon. Hey, our main goal at Gravity isn't really learning, even though our name is Gravity Learning. It's whether or not you ever use these tools ever again. Our drive is to get people to use these tools at work. And just sitting in a workshop doesn't make that happen. You know what I mean? Because there's no plan to transfer that into reality later. So let's use a couple of minutes, because we've only got 1 left, to make it more of a reality. Now, if you're learning project management, you can set an appointment for yourself to initiate a project, yeah? With emotional intelligence, it's not as easy. So here's the question for you. Who are you going to talk to about activating intelligence at work when you're emotional? You can talk to someone at home. You know, when you start getting emotional at work and your emotions get in the way of you saying what you would like to have said, or you make a face in a meeting, or you get frustrated, if you've talked to somebody about these methodologies, you're way more likely to use them again, aren't you? So here's a question for you. Who and who without a when is just a wish? In our time management workshops, we talk about the idea that the number one most highly correlated thing with whether or not you do a thing is whether or not it gets into your calendar at a specific time. It's a 97% increase. Do you know who you'll talk to about this stuff? Do you know when?
Yourself always.
So here's the big stuff. Look, emotions can't be controlled. That's a physical response. You are a human. That's the way it is. You can, on the other hand, like use a process to get your brain thinking. And then you practice that process until it becomes easier. Hey, in the chat, can you say a couple words about like what you found most useful, what you liked the most? If you want to hang around after and chat about it, I'll be around for up to half an hour or so. What you like the most is the wheel for Adriana. You're quick on the draw. That's on typing. Labeling the emotions is popular, isn't it? What's the thing you like the most? The thing you'll find most useful? For me, it was that question. Like, is this the only way you could be feeling, David? Pretty cool, isn't it? All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this on the house truncated workshop from Gravity Learning. My name is David Lieberman. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Nice way to start a Thursday, isn't it? If you want to hang out and chat or nerd out about this stuff or talk to Gravity Learning about how to do work with Gravity Learning, we are hanging around, and otherwise right there. Pleasure, everyone.